Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Super Tees video. What can retail World of Warcraft do in order to continue to grow into the future? What lessons can it learn from previous iterations of itself and from other games moving forward? That is the question that I am looking to answer in today's video. And if you want to stay up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, then make sure to smash that subscribe button. Now, World of Warcraft, of course, falls into the genre of MMORPG. Now, I do think that this genre comes with an inherent flaw, and it's one that I really don't know how you combat, because throughout multiple expansions, we've seen Blizzard approach it in different ways. And what is that flaw? Well, that flaw is called player gap, which is the distance between a just starting out player and an advanced player, and how that gap is created. So obviously right now with World of Warcraft Classic re-releasing here, we're seeing community. We're seeing a tremendous amount of players all grouping together to do the same content and to progress together in a journey, which is one of the biggest advantages of an MMORPG, is when it's new, when it's fresh. And this is why we see new fresh servers, a constant demand for fresh servers, because after 3 months of progression, that player gap widens so much so that if you started 2 months into the release of a fresh server, it's a ghost town. You're not seeing anybody around you. Everybody's progressed past you, and you're not of any use to them. They can't get you into content, and you can't really do anything together. And so the game feels disjointed. It feels isolating, and that's the main issue. Now, this issue is also created in retail World of Warcraft, although they have tried to combat it. And how are they combating it? Well, you level really fast. You go from level 1 to max level very, very, very quickly. And then when you get to max level, the gap is then created in the endgame system. So in something like Mythic Plus, it's going to be tied towards your item level, your character power, likely if your specialization is considered meta or not. And this is, dependent on the tuning of the game. But as you advance forward, the gap is created. So now you've got players that have started from day one and they've got max item level, they're playing meta specs and they're timing the highest keys, and you just started out, but nobody really wants to take you because you're not helpful to them. You're a liability. You're going to hold the group back. So how do we make it so players feel rewarded for helping newcomers? This is fundamentally the issue. How do we make players feel rewarded for being inclusive towards newcomers and new players, as opposed to trying to preserve what they're doing because they don't want to bring in the new player, right? Because it's a risk. They're a liability, and there's fairness on both sides. If the players who have been playing for a long time don't feel incentivized, they feel disincentivized in bringing in new players to their content, then why would they, right? So we need to think of systems that can help that gap. It'd be the same problem that's going to happen in Classic. I'm really excited for Classic. It's doing really well. The nostalgia, all the memories that come along with it, right? I started all the way back in the day on that game as well. But it's going to come into problems once that player gap is established, the same way that we're seeing it in retail at the moment. It happens in PvP as well with player skill between individual players. And it's something where we need to incentivize it, And I don't know exactly what those systems are that you can implement that incentivizes you to bring in a new player to your group, bring in an undergeared player to your group, and try and show them the ropes, aside from the fact that it's just going to be baseline community building, right? Like if you're going in and you're helping bring up new players and helping them bring in, then you're going to have more players available to you in order to continue to do the content that you desire to do. So it does fundamentally benefit you. Unfortunately, it's something that benefits you kind of down the road, and it's a bit of a risk, because who knows, maybe the person that you're trying to bring up through the ropes ends up being a bit of a dick, or just was taking advantage of the situation, or just decides to not continue playing the game in the future. So this is why it can feel like that mode there's no instant gratification. You don't just get your keystone done, you don't get your loot, you don't get your dopamine right away. You're kind of investing for the future that remains uncertain. So that uncertainty needs to be cleared up with some more kind of like immediate level of rewards. And maybe that's if you bring a player of a certain item level into your group, or if you bring a player maybe of a specialization that isn't considered meta, somehow it's going to give your groups more lenience towards the keystone timings, or maybe it's just going to give you more guaranteed loot. You could incentivize it that way. Maybe if every week it rotates, do a Mythic Plus dungeon with X spec, whatever is the least meta at the moment. Maybe it's a Feral Druid. So do a Mythic Plus Keystone with a Feral Druid this week, and you get 2 pieces of bonus loot from keystones for having that specialization in your group. So if players want to play competitively, you know, the sweats want to keep going it out and trying to push up to the top of the ladder, they can. But for other players who may be more interested in progressing their item level and progressing their character power, they can incorporate specializations that might otherwise be left out from the content because they're not considered cutting edge. Even if they're within 0.3% of what is a considered meta specialization, they still don't get included, so they can get brought in. And this was kind of attempted earlier with the affix system, which was like bring in bleed classes because bleeds are going to do 30% more damage this week, and that'll help you time the highest keys. And then players were complaining because then it's like, okay, well then I need to re-roll a spec basically every week or I'm not going to get invited. And they decided to scrap that idea and get rid of it entirely. So maybe something that's focused more towards the rewards end of it. You know, they have this in Hearthstone where you play a different deck, or you play with certain cards and then it gives you extra gold so you can buy more packs type of deal. So it's like, yeah, maybe the highest level players are not going to be running those decks, but for, you know, the majority of average players, it's like an interesting challenge, a different way to approach the game, and they're going to be rewarded for trying to include those challenges into their gameplay. So for me, that would be kind of the thing that I would like them to look at, is how do we make it rewarding for bringing in new players into World of Warcraft and for the current existing kind of player base, as opposed to leaving them behind and everybody feeling like they need to preserve what they're doing at the moment.